Hi guys, Samantha from GSMA Tutorials here, and today I'm going to show you a fun little project. So we're going to start out with Primo Polymer clay. I've got pale blue and blush. Those are the two colours I'm going to be working with. And I'm going to just make a skinner blend from the two. So I'll just fold the roughly square clay into a triangle and then just press that into the correct shape. If you want something a little more accurate, you can always just use a triangle cutter. I actually have a skinner blend cutter set on my shop if you're interested in something like that, but you can of course just get away with creating triangles just like this. Okay, and I'll do it with the pale blue as well. And if you don't know how to make a skinner blend, I have videos on this channel that go into great depth on how to make them, so just search skinner blend on the channel and you should find those. But you just want to make a basic two colour skinner blend. You just pop them together, make sure to leave a little bit of colour on each side like so, and create your blend. Okay, and here's how it should end up looking. So I've got this on a piece of plain printing paper. Then I'm going to bring over one of my newer stencils. Place that onto your piece like so. Bring over another piece of plain printing paper and burnish this on. You can use this with any stencil pattern you want. Make sure you burnish this on well. It needs to be well stuck into the clay, almost flat, like so. There you go. And that should do. Then you want to bring over some black pastels, and these are chalk pastels. I'm just going to use this one here. That's her side. And just coat the surface in black pastel. Don't use paint, because paint will stick to the stencil once dried. You can use paint if you're going to lift the stencil, but in this project we are not. We need to put the black on, and then we're going to put a layer of paint through a silk screen while the stencil's still on. So don't be using black paint, you want to be using either ink or some sort of powder, preferably powder. Okay, then you can use a brush or you can use your fingers. I prefer using my fingers. And you want to run that over the surface, making sure that you get a nice consistent coat, like so. Okay. Then dust off the excess, like so. Okay. Burnish that on thoroughly again, because you want the powder stuck to the clay. You don't want it to be lifted up by the silk screen that we're going to use in a moment, so make sure to burnish that on thoroughly. Okay, like so. And you'll see that that will have picked up a lot of excess. Then to make sure that it's that there's no loose powders, I would recommend now bringing over a brush, just going over it and wiping or brushing over like so. And this will just get rid of any excess powders. Okay, and that should do. Then I'm going to bring over this silk screen. I want to use this because it's kind of got a nice pattern. Just lift that up like so. And place that over the top where the stencil is resting. And then burnish that down, and make sure that you burnish it well because the powders are going to prevent it from sticking a bit. Okay, there we go. Then I'm going to bring over some acrylic paint like so. Hold on, let me just fix the lighting. There we go. And I'm just going to pop that across the surface like so. And I have to be careful because there's powders under this, and so the silk screen is not stuck down as well as it would be if we had plain clay. So I'm going to use my finger to go over the surface carefully, making sure not to press too hard. Usually you would use a swipe, but I'm a little worried that if I use that I'm going to get too much bleeding under the silkscreen because of the powders preventing it from sticking. So just gently wipe the clay, or wipe the paint through the clay. You can use a swipe if you want, just don't be as aggressive as you would usually, just have a light touch to it. Okay, and I'm just smoothing it out, making sure that I've got an even layer of paint over the surface. Okay. And I'll pick that up, and you can see there that it did have a little bit of paint bleeding through, but not too much. Okay, go clean your silkscreen. Okay, and I've just popped it into a bath of warm water because I don't want this paint to dry before I lift the stencil. So lift the stencil, and you can see there how the pattern looks quite nice. You want to lift the stencil before the paint dries, that will give you a cleaner effect. Let this dry completely before fussing with it. Clean off the stencil, preferably while the paint is still wet. Clean the silkscreen as well, and by the time you've done it, this should have dried. Okay, in the meantime, while that is off to the side drying, I want you to bring over a piece of black clay, rolled out on the same setting as your other pieces were, preferably your thickest setting. And what I am going to do, oops, just position that down. There's cat fluff in everything. Let me know in the comments below if you have a special someone that tends to leave hair in your projects as well. I have 2 cats, and if it's not one, it's the other. So anyway, back on track. Got a piece of black clay rolled out in a thicker setting. I am using a texture stamp, also a floral pattern, just so that it matches, and we're going to create the backing. All I'll do is I'm just going to stand up to do this, and I want you to roll across the surface of the clay. Any texture will do, and of course any stencil will do, any colours. There's lots of ways that you can mix up this project. Sorry, there's a garden service next door and they're making a bit of noise, so I do apologise for that. Okay, so there we go. As I was saying, you can mix up the project to whatever you want. You can use different colours, different textures, different stencils, completely up to you. So that is going to be our back. Pop that to the side, and by now our piece should have completely dried. Yes, it has. So I will use a piece of paper to just very gently burnish it, because the stencil will have left a little bit of a texture. If you want that there, you can of course keep that. You don't have to burnish it out. Okay, there we go. And it will just make sure that the paint, powders and everything are just laid down, and it's all going to stay put. Lift that up gently, and that should work. Using another piece of paper, or the opposite side, whichever you want, take that, flip it over, and just burnish it so it's stuck down. Okay. And then lift. And this side is a little dirty, don't worry about that, it really does not matter, as we have got our backing clay, which I'm just going to give a very gentle stretch, just so that it fits a bit better. Lay that down, like so. And there we go. I'm going to just trim away our excess spots. And this hasn't been stuck down enough for it to not separate. You should be able to separate it, so you can save the black and use it again. You don't have to put that in scraps. Gonna trim up the bottom just to make sure that everything is nice and clean and ready to cut pieces out. Now the reason I've made it so thick is because I want to be able to cut pieces out of it and then drill them through the sides. So that's why they're so thick, if you're wondering. Right. Okay. So I'm just going to move this to the side. I'm going to bring over a tile that can go into my oven. Take this, flip it over. Then I want you to just give this a very gentle burnish, not enough to flatten out the texture on the back. Okay, still there. I just check every once in a while to make sure I'm not doing it too hard. Okay, that works well, and that's stuck down. Then I want you to grab your cutters, and don't cut down immediately. Take them, place them around, make sure that they all fit, because so many times I've made the mistake of taking the first cutter, getting excited, cutting, and then I realised that I should have placed it better. So just make sure they all fit. I've checked that they fit, but you just want to get them into generally the right placement before you start. Then I'll press them in, get them secure. Okay. Then starting with the smallest, I'm going to cut and just lift once you've cut like halfway through, and this just unsticks it from the cutter. And I'll do that a few times until I cut straight through. And it will still stick in the cutter slightly. And to unstick it, I generally will just blow, and because it's not very stuck, it will pop straight out like it did there. Okay. Then I will just pop that to the side, and I will repeat with all of them the same process. And the larger the cutter, the less likely it is to stick. You're going to have the most trouble with the small ones. This one I don't think will stick. There, so you can see that one didn't stick. So the small ones you're going to have trouble with. But don't worry, because you unstuck it a few times before you cut it the full way, it should come out relatively easily. Okay, and there they are after they've all been cut out and transferred to a piece of printing paper. So now I'm going to put those into the oven for a full hour at Primo's recommended temperature, and then when they are done, we are going to give the sides a sand, because when you cut through paint, more often than not it doesn't cut completely cleanly, so we do have a little bit of stuff along the sides that needs to be trimmed off, and then we will varnish them. Okay, and here they are out of the oven. So I've given the sands, I've given the sides a sand so they're nice and smooth, and I've just used a 400 grit sandpaper to do that. And then with all but this one, I have also gone and drilled a hole. So I put these to the side, and the easiest way to do that is to just grab a drill, just brace it against your work surface. The one I'm using is a glazed ceramic tile. Just drill part of the way through, then hold it in your fingers and just place a thumb on the, or finger on the one side, and just drill slowly. You don't want to come bursting through the other end and into your finger. You just want to go until you feel slight bumps, so hopefully just pull that out. You can see that there's a very small white spot. That's very easy to feel with your finger, and it tells you when your drill's about to pop through. Then you'll go back through the other way, and that means that you'll end up with a nice clean hole. And that is generally straight because you'll have been holding it and making sure it's nice and straight. Okay, now on the subject of sealing, you can seal these with any varnish you want. You can use a gloss varnish, a matte varnish, they all work. You don't necessarily have to seal them if you burnished the powders in there well enough. If you can run your finger over the top of this vigorously and have no residue come up, then you don't really need to sand it. seal it, because the powder has been burnished thoroughly into that clay and will not lift off. It also was in a bath of water when I was sanding the sides, so any excess has been basically removed. The paint will have been baked on, and that doesn't really need to be sealed either, so you can seal it if you want, but you don't necessarily have to. Okay, so now we are going to move on to stringing. Okay, then I'm going to bring over my cord, and then I have a little Charlotte lobster or clamshell clasp. They are interchangeable names depending on where you purchase it, so try out all those names. Then this is a crimp bead. Take that, squish it onto the end, bring your little finding back up and squeeze like so. Grab your jump ring, grab one end of your clasp and attach it to the end like so. Okay, there we go. Okay, then I brought in some wooden beads, and the reason I'm using wooden ones is because I want them to match the matte finish. And I'm going to take the little white ones. I'm going to string on one white, one black, and then another white, and then I will pop on one of my beads. Then I'll repeat that pattern of 2 whites and 1 black throughout until I finished all the pendants. Okay, then when it's done, you want to finish off this end the exact same way you did this end. And there we go, that's how it should look when it's finished. And here's the other end with the clasp. But yeah, that's basically it for today's tutorial. If you enjoyed it, please do let me know in the comments below, and if you'd like to support this channel so that I can continue creating videos just like this one every week, please do consider becoming a member of the channel or a member of my Patreon group. There is a link to Patreon in the description below, and there is a join button below the video for the YouTube membership. Or another way to support this channel is to purchase the tools and supplies that I stock on my Etsy shop that I use in the tutorials. We have cutters, silkscreens, stencils, you name it. We have just about everything as far as tools and supplies go. So please do check that out. And subscribing and liking and commenting on the video is also really helpful. It's free, so if you can do that, that is really helpful and is greatly appreciated. And as always, I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.